Hey, good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Yeah, awesome. I like some enthusiasm. Cool. Okay, my name is James TITCUMB, as introduced. I have been doing PHP stuff since around 2002, programming since before that as a kid, open source contributor, available to hire through Rove. You can find me on Blue Sky, Mastodon, and we also have a Rove Discord server, which is a community of just nerds hanging out and having fun. You're welcome to join us. Okay, so I'm currently doing some work for the PHP Foundation. The PHP Foundation is, one of the supporters is the Sovereign Tech Agency. It is a branch funded by the German government, and their goal, which aligns quite nicely with the PHP Foundation itself, is to promote and ensure longevity of open source ecosystem. One of the projects they were supporting is Pi, which is what I'm working on. So a big thanks to the Sovereign Tech Agency and, of course, all the PHP Foundation supporters who make this a reality. So, I'm here to talk to you about Pi. First up, what is it? Well, it is the new PHP installer for extensions. As the name suggests, it helps you install extensions for PHP itself, okay? So, this project started a while ago with some goals in mind, or at least initial goals, right? But before we look at that, we need to have a look at a bit of a history. First up, we have PAIR, the PHP extension and application repository, which was founded back in 1999, a while ago. It's both a tool, if you've never heard of this, who has never heard of PAIR, sorry. There's a few people, you've heard of PAIR. There's a few people who've never heard of PAIR, wow. Does not surprise me, because, we have Composer these days, right? But yeah, PAIR was both a tool and a distribution system. It was designed for PHP authors to take their code, bundle it up into a nice package, list some dependencies, and distribute it on what they call PAIR channels. It's still actually operational, but as many of you are probably aware, Composer and Packagist have taken the PHP community by storm. It's a very good tool and does the job very well. So one of the problems with PAIR, of course, is now it's quite unmaintained. The code is very old. Very few people want to actually look at it. So not ideal. So what has this got to do with extensions? Well, next up we have PECL. It's pronounced pickle. I will probably say peckle a lot because I'm wrong, because that's how I read it. But anyway, it's supposed to be pronounced pickle. It's the PHP extension community library. It's the same concept as PAIR, but instead of PHP packages, PECL is concerned with C extensions, so PHP extensions that you add additional C code to, and so on. PECL, the tool, is built on top of PAIR, so this is where the link comes in. It uses the same mechanisms, and the PECL code is also very old, and not many people want to look at it and maintain it anymore. So, there's also this other thing, pecl.php.net. It's a website. You can go to this website. It's still there for now. And this is where it's like Packagist, but for PHP extensions, right? And it's slightly more complex than you would do with Composer. Like, with Composer, you want to publish a new package, you put your GitHub URL or GitLab URL and so on into Packagist, and then everything magically works, right? It's not the case with PECL. Every time you have to make a new release, you have to use a tool to make this bundle, and then you upload it to this pecl.php.net website, and then it will do some checks, back in the olden days, it used to have an integration where it would go and build some Windows DLLs for Windows PHP users and so on, but that died back in 2022, I think. But it's back, yeah. That was my next point. The team have been working on getting this back up and running, so there is Windows builds now, which is great. But the PECL site is an additional maintenance burden. It's not very friendly for extension maintainers. You have to go through a lot of extra hoops. So, the goals. Well, we want modernization of this stuff, maintainability of this stuff, and try and make it simpler for everyone, not just maintainers, but end users who want to install extensions. The dependency resolution in PECL sort of vaguely exists. It's not very good, right? Composer far exceeded the capability that Pair and PECL have. So we wanted a new simplified installer that doesn't use Pair. We wanted to write a new tool with more modern practices, use modern packages and so on, use Composer, in fact. We wanted improved dependency resolution and so on. So there are also some things that we didn't necessarily want to start off with doing. We'll come back to some of these, but we didn't want to do Linux, OS X, and so on, binary distribution, because there are so many different permutations of platforms, dependencies, combinations of this, different libcs, and all sorts of nightmare stuff, right? And conversely, on Windows, it's actually a lot more difficult to build stuff on Windows. You have to install a load of stuff just to be able to install stuff. Build stuff. So we want to carry on with being able to provide DLLs that are pre-built for Windows. It's much simpler because one DLL works on pretty much most Windows, I think. We did not want to continue maintaining and writing a package registry like Packagist. And we didn't want to really write a dependency manager and things like that. That's very complicated, actually. And we also don't want to install system dependencies. Like, for example, the iMagick extension requires the iMagick library to be installed. Simple XML requires libxml and all this kind of stuff. And that gets quite complicated quite quickly. You think, oh, how hard could it be? Well, apparently quite hard. We also don't have an initial goal, at least, of installing extensions per project, right? So if you've never really looked into extensions, when you install an extension, it's installed along with the PHP itself, right? Not your project. So your project might depend on these extensions, but your extension, when you build it and run it, it goes with PHP, not your project. So it's global, if you like, to that PHP install. So, brief timeline. Back in 2023, this idea sort of started taking course. Derek Rethans, he laid out the initial plans and said, okay, this is what we want to do. He put out these goals and so on. And shortly after that, Roman from the PHP Foundation, he reached out and said, hey, would you like to work on this Pi tool? And I'm like, yep, sure. So in January 2024, I started with the PHP Foundation, and very quickly we had a meeting, not just PHP Foundation people, but several sort of dependency-related people, right? We had Jordi and Nils from Packagist Composer team there, other interested parties, and we just sort of fleshed out, okay, this is what we want to do, how are we going to do it? Nils and Jordi took one of the issues off our list straight away, and they said, use Packagist. It's there. It does what it was. That does what you need. And use Composer, and we'll support you with like integrating Composer stuff with Pi. So yeah, that's great. And yes, indeed, in October 2024, we actually made the first release. Very basic stuff, just like being able to download, build, and install extensions. I mean, in reality, 9 months was spent picking a name for the project, because everyone knows there's two hard problems in programming: cache invalidation, naming things, and off-by-one errors. So the remaining month was actual development work. No, I'm kidding, we did work on it. But yeah, eventually we released the first tool. You could do some basic stuff with that. There are various iterations since then. We've improved stuff, overhauled stuff completely in the way it works and things like that. But in June of this year, we got the 1.0 release out, primarily because we want people to start using it, right? And if people see, oh, it's not like 1.0 yet, then they're going to like, okay, we'll just hold off for now until it's more stable. So there's this chicken and egg scenario where we want people to try and use it. And some people were using it, giving us feedback that's useful. Now a lot more people are using it, so we get better feedback, which is good. Recently, just last month, in fact, we officially deprecated PECL. So that tool is still there. You can still use it. It's still actually bundled with PHP itself and so on. But it's by messaging only deprecated, right? So we should be trying to start using Pi instead of PECL where possible. Today and beyond, well, in the 1.1 release, we had quite a cool addition. It's only actually useful in sort of a limited subset of scenarios, like bundling PHP extensions with Pi. Remember the right name of the tool, eh? There are various improvements that have been made since then, and very soon we'll be releasing a 1.3 release, which will have PHP 8.5 support and so on. And we'll look into this stuff in a bit more detail. So, how does Pi work? Well, has anyone ever installed a PHP extension themselves manually? Okay, so this looks probably familiar to many of you. This is really how you install a PHP extension. That's all there is to it. So why did we make this tool? Well, no, we've taken what PHP ecosystem has learned from Composer and all the modern practices and so on, because we want to make it easier to install PHP extensions. So yes, once you've got the source code, it's PHPI's configure, make, and install. But we want to make that more friendly. We want to be able to improve the user experience for both maintainers of extensions and users of extensions, right? So, this is what Pi install would look like. This is a very basic, I want to install a particular extension, right? In the days of PECL, you might have been like, PECL install the name of the extension. There's a subtle difference in Pi, is that we're using probably what's familiar if you're used to Composer, like a vendor/package name approach. So we have in Pi both the concept of a package name and an extension name. So your project still would require like ext, whatever the name of the extension is, but when you install it with Pi, there's this slight disconnect because you install it with like asgrim/example Pi extension. There's not an easy way to map those without being sort of favoritism and things like that. So we'll leave that up to you for now. So as a maintainer, what can I do to start adding Pi support into my extension? Well, step one, add a Composer JSON, right? So Pi uses Composer extensively in a lot of the tasks that it does because, well, that code was already written. Let's use it. It's there. So we add a Composer JSON. It would look something like this, perhaps. The type is slightly different from what you may have seen before. So we have PHP-ext for a regular PHP module, or a PHP-ext Zend for a Zend extension. There's not many of those around these days, but there are some, like opcache, I think, is one. When it was an extension, it's now. If you saw Derek's talk yesterday, you would have seen that opcache is now bundled with PHP 8.5. And you can also specify supported PHP versions, which you could sort of do in PECL before, but it wasn't very reliable, and sometimes you just ended up getting an extension that wasn't compatible with your PHP version. So, not ideal. We also have a whole load of new stuff, which we couldn't specify within the normal Composer JSON schema. So, thankfully, Jordi has facilitated adding these new schema components in the PHP ext section of your composer JSON. And we can have things like the extension name. So that helps people find your extension by extension name, because Pi will pay attention to that when you're looking for an extension. Your configure options as well. If you've ever built something, there are options that you can pass to configure, like library paths and things like that. There are a whole bunch of other fields like priority, support, whether you support thread safe, non-thread safe, things like that, the build path, some various other configuration options and so on. They're all documented, hopefully fairly well, but if anyone ever, like an extension maintainer, is like, what is this nonsense? Please just reach out. I'm happy to help with all of this stuff. Step 2. You submit your package to packagist.org. And that's exactly the same as you would do with a normal PHP library, right? So the process is exactly the same. Packagist will look at your Git repo and say, oh, here's your composer JSON, and then your PHP extension is now available on Packagist. Recently, they've added some additional stuff like that reads that PHP ext information, tells you about that extension. It shows it slightly differently. I think it has like a little Pi emoji and things like that. So it's cool. It's all coming to fruition. And if you plan to support Windows with your Pi extension, you can add a CI job that is already made for you. Shivam Mathur at the PHP Foundation worked on this GitHub action that automatically will build your Windows DLL and attach it to your GitHub release, for example. We're looking into ways of doing this for like GitLab and other stuff as well. So at the moment, that action is GitHub action is only for GitHub for now. But basically, with Windows, as I mentioned, you have pre-built Windows DLLs, so you need to provide a way of getting those. So how does this workflow look like? Basically, extensions that Pi manage, as I said, is kind of very similar to a typical composer project, right? So we actually have this like secret location where we have a Pi JSON file and a vendor directory. I said it works in the same way as Composer. So what we actually do is make like a mini project for each PHP version that you have on your system. If you only have one PHP version, then there's only going to be one anyway. But you'll find in like .py, home directory .py/php version, and then some long hash. And in that directory, you'll find this Pi JSON, which is basically saying what Pi extensions are installed on this PHP install. So it's scoped to that particular PHP version, right? It's not per project, as I said. It's just for each individual PHP version, because you can have multiple PHP versions on one system, if you didn't know. So knowing this, the first part of Pi install package is to figure out the requirement, right? Pi uses Composer to do this, and it will look for, in the same way as you would require any other package when you do Composer, require blah, blah, blah. It will do the same. If you omit the version, which you can, it will look for the latest stable version, and you can specify if you want release candidates, beta versions, and all that kind of stuff, just like in Composer. This also checks a couple of things. It checks if the package exists. It checks if the package is compatible with your PHP version, which Peckle never did. And it also checks that the package is available in your stability that you've chosen. Once we've found a package, we say, OK, we found this particular extension. We add it to the Pi JSON for that PHP version in the requires section. The next step, we leverage Composer again to do all the heavy lifting. In practice, this is more or less the same as downloading any PHP package. You will see in that directory, if you're looking closely, you will see the vendor directory then has the actual extension code in it. Obviously, if this was a normal PHP project, it would be useless to you because it's got a load of C files or something. But Pi will then take that after that, and it will then have a plugin, which we'll look at in a moment. It's a composer plugin, so again, it's just leveraging the composer flow here. And then it will do the standard PHPI's configure, make, install process. We also do a bit of cleanup as well to remove the source code and build assets and things like that. It seems that some extensions make many gigabytes of build assets. I think it's to do with Rust and things like that. But so yeah, we clean up after just to not leave many gigabytes of files lying around on your system, because I think you'd probably not be very happy. I mentioned that when you run Pi, it makes this directory for each PHP version, but you can actually use Pi to install packages for a different version of PHP than the one that you are running. So for example, if you have PHP 8.1 installed and PHP 7.4 installed, Pi actually requires PHP 8.1 to run. So you would run Pi with PHP 8.1, but then you can say, hey, I want to point at PHP 7.4 to install the extension on. And so you would use with PHP config. PHP config, if you've not heard of it, is basically a short script which tells tools all about the PHP install. So it'll tell you where the PHP binary is, where extensions should go, some build flags, all this kind of stuff, which may be useful to people like Pi developers. So you can use with PHP config to target a different version of PHP than the one you are running Pi with, which is useful because Pi, as I said, you need PHP 8.1 to run Pi, but you can install extensions on any version of PHP. So 7.4, probably 4, I don't know. I've never tried it, but it should in theory work. With PHP path is used on Windows, though. It doesn't have a PHP config script, so we have to do things slightly differently on Windows. And you will specify with PHP path to say, hey, I want to use the different version of PHP. OK, so let's have a look at some of the Pi features. What can Pi do? Well, there is a nightly build. It's not really nightly as such. It's just whenever things get merged to the trunk. It's still in active development. I'm still adding stuff frequently. So if you want to try things out, the very latest cutting-edge stuff that hasn't quite been released yet, you are free to do so. And obviously, if you encounter issues, please let me know. It's linked on the Pi GitHub page. Everything is on the Pi GitHub page at the moment. Hopefully, some point, we'll add this to the PHP docs and so on. So there is a Pi show command, which will display all of your Pi extensions. And if you add --all, it will list all of the extensions, even the ones that Pi didn't install. It reads a load of metadata in the vendor directory that we talked about already. And it also does a checksum of the actual extension file itself, just to make sure it's the one that Pi actually installed. Because you can install extension with Pi, and then go ahead and build it elsewhere and overwrite it. So Pi then is kind of out of sync, if you like. So we just check this, and that's what that little green tick mark is when you run Pi show. And it will tell you if it does not match, it will just have like a warning triangle, I think. So I use emojis a lot in this thing, apparently. Since 1.2, Pi 1.2 version, you can also see, it doesn't show it on this screen, but it will tell you if an extension can be upgraded within the constraint that you originally provided. So you know in Composer JSON in your projects, you will put oh, I need this library version, like the hat symbol, and then 2.0 or something. The semver operator, I think it's called. So you can do the same with Pi, right? And you say, I want any extension that is semantically compatible with the one that I've got. And then if you run Pi show and there is a new version, it will tell you, hey, there's a new version. And then you can upgrade it. I'm working on a bulk upgrade tool as well in the future. So that's spoiler alert. So the recommended way to run Pi is as a regular user, not root. However, in some PHP installs, probably quite a few, PHP is in a root-owned directory. So we need to be able to elevate privileges. So we use sudo for that. And it was quite an interesting journey figuring out all of the touch points and figuring out different approaches to like updating a file, like the actual extension itself and ini files and so on. So we actually have now a load of wrappers that allow us to do file operations using sudo if it's available. We use a library. So again, we're trying to use all the modern stuff, not have to rewrite all the code. So we use CPU core counter. Obviously, when you build stuff, you want to be able to build it on as many CPUs as possible. So we use that to try and automatically determine. If it can't determine it or it determines it wrong, then you can still override it if you ever need to. Adding an extension to a PHP ini was something we added in quite early on in 0.3. And you might think, well, how hard can it be, right? Just adding a line to an ini file? Well, apparently, it's quite difficult. It's mainly because there are so many different package managers and approaches to this particular problem space. Like the deb.siri.org repo for Ubuntu and Debian and things like that. They use this tool PHP eonmod and PHP dismod and so on. So if we actually detect that tool exists, we'll try and use that to enable or disable the extension. Docker images, like the PHP Docker image provides this Docker PHP ext enable tool. So if we detect the existence of that, we will use that to try and enable the extension. Otherwise, PHP itself actually has two primary ways of defining ini files. One, you can have an additional ini files directory, or you can just have a single ini file. So we go through all the various ways that we know of trying to enable an extension. And if we can't, for whatever reason, there are some weird setups. For example, on my system, when I'm developing it, I encounter this one quite a lot. If I have deb.siri because I run Ubuntu, and it will detect that the tool exists and try and use it to enable that, but I'm trying to enable an extension in a completely different, not deb.siri version of PHP. So it gets confused sometimes. But it covers like the 80% use case, which is good. That's what we're trying to do. You can verify your Pi version. So if you download a pi.far from somewhere, you can verify that it was built in the PHP official CI pipeline. Make sure it's genuine. We use GH attestation for that. And the self-verify command does the same. But we also if someone doesn't have the GH command line installed, we made this new library called attestation, which does like the basic checks. It will check like the certificate is valid, it checks your digest and so on, all matches. We made this a separate library because actually the composer folks are looking into using this stuff for, I'm not sure exactly what for, but they were like, can we have that attestation code that we've written in Pi? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you folks helped us out a lot with Pi, so it's easy to return the favor. Pi self-update is something available as well. You can update your Pi version. I'm making some improvements to that now actually as well to have like stable or nightly or preview versions and so on in the similar way to Composer. We can manage repositories as well. So you can actually install, in the same way as Composer can, you can add additional repositories where Composer metadata can come from. So like a local directory, a different packagist instance, for example, if you use private packagist, and things like that. We can also uninstall packages. I don't know why you'd want to do that. But yeah, you can. Yeah, so it will try and remove the .so file and the ini entry. It actually comments out the ini entry in case you ever need it for whatever reason. But this is a cool feature that Peckle never had, which is where you can go to your PHP project directory and just run pi install. And hopefully, that will look through your project's Composer JSON, and it will find if all of the extensions are installed on the system. And if not, it will try and find them for you. So it will search for packagist for whatever your missing extension is, and suggest that you install it. And since 1.3, which we'll be releasing soon, hopefully, we're introducing a non-interactive mode where it will try its absolute best to install something. But if there's more than one package that matches a particular extension, we have to bail, unfortunately. But you opt into that behavior with a nice long parameter. It's meant to be run in CI, so it's okay. It's called allow non-interactive project install flag. So yeah, that's coming soon. If you are an extension maintainer, this one is very useful for you. You can go to your extension directory and just run pi-install, and it will build that extension. It's actually just a shortcut for adding a local file path repository, running pi-install for the package, and then removing the local file path. So it's just a useful shortcut. Right? Another useful use case for this is like if you want to try out an extension before it's published to Packagist or something like that, make sure it works with Pi, you can use this. You can use Pi in your Docker file as well. This will only install the Pi file. It will not install any dependencies that you need, like GCC and autoconf and all the stuff that you need to build extensions. So just be aware of that. But it is available, useful in some cases with Docker. I mean, this is not something I've explicitly done, but people have asked, oh, does it support Rust? Does it support C++ and so on? I'm like, well, yes, as long as it works with PHPI's configure, make, install, then it will work with Pi. So technically, we support all this stuff. You can, very soon, once 1.3 comes out, you'll be able to list dependencies using PyInfo as well. So it will tell you if you've got library versions. Obviously, these. So an extension maintainer in their Pi's extensions composer JSON can define, oh, I need like libcurl, for example. This is what Pi will look at. It will look at those lib whatever, or even other extensions, and make sure that they are installed. And it will tell you in PyInfo. Could Pi install those extensions? Those dependencies? Yes, in theory. It's quite difficult. As I mentioned, there are so many different platforms and so on. What I'm probably trying to do soon is kind of try and cover the 80% use case. Like if someone is using apt or yum or Alpine or I've forgotten, whatever package manager. So we'll try and do our best to find these dependencies and install them. But it won't be like 100% coverage. Like some will just like, oh, I can't find this library. There might be some extension which uses a library that doesn't even exist in Package Manager and has to be built manually. We probably won't cover that, at least initially. So we're looking into that, hopefully soon. You can, as of recently, 1.1 release, you can install what we call PHP bundled extensions. So for example, Sodium, quite often, like when you install with like deb.suri, for example, .org, you will be able to install PHP, whatever the version, Sodium, and it will build that. So that's probably a better approach. But if you have built your own PHP install for whatever reason, and you want to add Sodium onto that after, then you can do with pi-install PHP Sodium, for example. So yeah, it's just a caveat, and it will actually tell you if we detect you're using deb.suri.org or remi-repo or docker php ext install, it will tell you you probably shouldn't use this, because you can end up with like your PHP version being one thing, and then your extension version being a different version of PHP's extension, which is not good. You'll be in a mess. It may work, it may not, but I want to try and avoid that confusion. I mentioned PHP 8.5 support is coming very soon. We actually added it already, but obviously when they tag the release candidate branch for the first time, the API version changes. So like if you've built previous Windows DLLs, for example, or whatever, it will then suddenly stop working, and it's a bit confusing. I encountered that myself. So yeah, we'll say PHP 8.5 support is officially in 1.3, right? So what have we got coming up soon? I actually mentioned this one already. I want to be able to just run pi upgrade, and it will upgrade all of your existing Pi extensions. That would be cool. I also mentioned this one, in fact. I want to be able to check for platform dependencies, right? It's work in progress right now. There is actually, I think, a pull request open already. And so, as I said, an extension maintainer will be able to say, hey, I need lib whatever, libsodium, for example. And Pi will use package config, with pkg config, which is a tool available for some build systems that supports some libraries, to detect if it's there. We'll look into other ways of doing that. I know stuff like PHP brew has similar mechanisms, so we'll be looking into that stuff soon. And also being able to install them, that would be cool. So using apt, yum, apk, all that kind of stuff. So we won't cover 100%, but we'll try and add that in. Hopefully, very soon, we'll have some kind of end of life for PECL and the PECL website. I imagine the first logical step will basically be to make the PECL.php.net website read-only. So obviously, you'll still be able to work, download those PECL extensions if you have some old systems relying on it. For now, and then maybe some point in the distant future, no one's using PECL anymore, and we can turn it off. So fingers crossed. I think there's a long journey there. A constant thing I keep trying to do is go to extensions that I find, well, there's a huge list of them, massive list of them, and try and send pull requests to make extension maintainers aware of the fact that this thing exists, because some may not be. So it's partly a, getting the word out there as well. And obviously, Pi support can only be added if the maintainer actually does something. If they're not interested in maintaining the extension anymore, it's not a huge amount we can do. But we try and get as many extensions added as possible to Packagist. Project scoped extensions is something that we would really like to do, but is not very simple. And I think in order to do it well, we'd have to change PHP itself in how extensions get loaded. So it's something that I'd really like to do because it would be cool. And it would just install extensions in your vendor directory of your PHP project or something. But getting there requires a bit of thought and coordination. So it's something I'd like to do, hopefully soon. I don't know, we'll see. I would do a demo. Unfortunately, my laptop didn't work with the projector, so I can't show you the demo. Yeah, what do you want to see in Pi? We're always open to suggestions. There is the GitHub discussions thing. Feel free to, if you think of something cool or have a question, please do ask away. I want to try and be as responsive as possible and make this process easy for everyone to use, right? And how can you help? Well, try it out. Make sure it works with stuff that you're doing. Make sure all of your extensions build for your projects and things like that. If you can update your build process to use Pi instead of PECL, all that kind of stuff. And let us know if you encounter any issues. And with that, thank you very much, everyone. I've really enjoyed speaking to you about Pi today.
Thank you, James, for this presentation. We had some delay in the main room, so this gave us the opportunity to take some questions. So do we have? Yes.
Thank you for the questions, for the talk. I have a question. You speak about upgrade of the dependency, but is there some things that are in the future to help to upgrade PHP? I mean, we are in version 8.4. We need to go to 8.5. Perhaps some extension need to be upgraded. Is there some mechanism that will be there?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of the bulk Pi upgrade command. So if you change your PHP version that you want, then you can do a fresh install anyway, right? Because it's going to be a different PHP version. So your extensions directory is still going to be empty. So then you just do a Pi install, and the dependency resolution that we use from Composer will make sure that as long as it's been defined correctly by the extension maintainer, it will make sure that your extension is compatible with like 8.5, for example. So, cool, thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
It's really nice to see that it gets easier to have PHP, to install PHP and use it. I'd like to know if there is a plan that at some point Pi gets very mature and could be just kind of bundled directly inside PHP so that we could use like something PHP install extension and it works.
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's something that has come up a couple of times, and I think at the moment, just because of the fact that we're actively developing new features and so on, it wouldn't be a good idea to bundle it with PHP because the speed at which PHP gets released is much slower than what I'm currently doing. One potential way of doing this is to bundle an installer script that would just download the latest FAR and verify it, for example. That's plausible, probably easier to get in the door for that. But certainly, maybe in the future when we're not really releasing very often, potentially we could sync it up with PHP. But I think that's a bit of a way in the distance. But again, there's still that question of like, it restricts how often we can release, and it kind of ties us up to the PHP's release timeframes and so on. So maybe, but certainly like an installer script is plausible. So, thank you.
Hi. Thank you very much for the conference and for your work on this great tool. I just have one question about private extensions. Is it already possible to bundle some private extension in maybe private packages or satis?
Yes, yes, it is, yes. So the repository is part of the talk, where you add a repository. You can, in the same way as you do with Composer, you disable packagist.org, and you add your private packagist repository. You would do the same in Pi, but there's actually command lines to do this in Pi that don't exist in Composer. So you would do like Pi, I think is add repository, and then the repository type would be Composer, and then you give it your private packagist URL, and then you would do, don't quote me on these, I'm doing it off my head. You do like Pi remove repository packagist.org or something like that. So that would set you up in the same way as you're used to for private packagist when you're just using Composer. So yes, absolutely. There is a caveat actually in that I haven't tested like Windows builds. I think they would work because they use your Composer auth token anyway to query the GitHub API to download the releases. If you don't use Windows, then maybe it's not an issue anyway. But yes, it should work. If you do encounter any issues, let me know. Nils has given me a private packagist for developing this anyway, so I can hopefully, if you're having issues, I can reproduce it, hopefully. So, yes.
That was the last question. Thank you, James. Thank you.
Thank you very much.